Blood dripped from Dr. Imani Reynolds' wrist, where security handcuffs sliced into her dark skin as they dragged the respected neurosurgeon and CEO of MedTech Innovations off American Skyways Flight 3429. White passengers recorded the humiliation on smartphones, but nobody intervened while security officers labeled her belligerent, despite her composed demeanor. With remarkable presence of mind, she made one final call to her CFO, authorizing the immediate withdrawal of their $4 billion investment deal with the airline. When American Skyways CEO's panicked call reached her phone minutes later, the damage was already irreversible. How could a routine first-class flight transform into a nightmare of racial injustice that would forever change the aviation industry? Before we dive into this shocking story of discrimination and corporate accountability, tell us where you're watching from, and if you believe in fighting for justice in our society, hit that like and subscribe button to stay updated on more powerful stories of resilience against systemic racism. Dr. Imani Reynolds never imagined her routine business trip would end in handcuffs and a viral video. Just 12 hours earlier, she sat in her corner office overlooking the Boston skyline, reviewing her presentation for potential investors in San Francisco. As the founder and CEO of MedTech Innovations, she had transformed a small biotech startup into a $47 billion powerhouse revolutionizing cancer treatment. The upcoming meeting represented the culmination of 15 years of relentless work, sleepless nights, and groundbreaking discoveries that could secure $10 billion in funding for their new therapeutic platform. Her executive assistant, Angela, knocked softly before entering with final travel documents. "Everything's confirmed, Dr. Reynolds. First class on American Skyways, hotel suite overlooking the bay, and car service waiting at arrivals." Imani nodded, sliding her Harvard Medical School diploma into her briefcase alongside her Mayo Clinic residency certificate. These credentials had opened many doors, but never quite erased the skepticism she constantly faced as a Black woman in medicine and business. She checked her watch, custom-made by a Swiss designer who counted presidents among his clients. Her wardrobe, credentials, and demeanor were all part of the armor she had learned to wear. "Did American Skyways confirm our meeting next week?" Imani asked. Angela nodded. "Their executives seem extremely eager to secure the partnership. $4 billion would be their largest private investment this year." Imani smiled thinly. American Skyways had been courting MedTech Innovations for months, hoping the partnership would modernize their aging fleet and repair their troubled financial outlook. Boarding the plane the next morning, Imani settled into seat 2A in first class. Her tailored suit and quiet confidence usually communicated her status without words. The flight attendant, a blonde woman named Brenda according to her name tag, moved efficiently through the cabin. Imani noticed immediately how Brenda's smile brightened when addressing the older white man across the aisle, calling him "Sir," unprompted. When she reached Imani's seat, her smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Something to drink?" she asked without making eye contact. "Sparkling water, please," Imani replied. 20 minutes passed. Drinks had been served to everyone in first class except Imani. She pressed the call button. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. Finally, Brenda returned. "Sorry for the wait," she said without sincerity. Imani requested her drink again, receiving only a curt nod in response. The white businessman across the aisle had already received 2 refills of his scotch, each delivered with a warm smile. As Imani removed her presentation materials to review them one final time, Brenda pushed the beverage cart past her seat. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. The cart bumped Imani's elbow, sending Brenda's pot of coffee directly onto the meticulously prepared presentation. "Oh," Brenda gasped, making no move to help as steaming liquid soaked through, pages representing months of research. "My mistake." The businessman across the aisle looked up sharply, eyes widening at the obvious slight. Imani maintained her composure, years of facing microaggressions having trained her to never show anger. "Could I please have some napkins?" she asked evenly. Brenda shrugged. "We're running low, I'll check if we have any extra." She walked away without urgency, leaving Imani to watch coffee drip onto her Louboutin heels. The businessman across the aisle wordlessly handed Imani his unused cocktail napkins. Their eyes met briefly, his expression conveying understanding. of what they'd both witnessed. As Brenda continued serving other passengers, pointedly ignoring Imani's ruined documents, an unsettling realization formed in her mind. This 4-hour flight was about to become much longer than anticipated. 20 minutes passed since the coffee incident, and Imani's soggy presentation materials dried into stiff, stained sheets. She again pressed the call button, determined to maintain her professionalism despite growing frustration. The businessman across the aisle caught her eye and shook his head slightly, confirming that he too recognized the pattern of neglect. As she waited, her mind drifted to her childhood in Baltimore, specifically to her mother's calm voice after 10-year-old Imani came home crying when her teacher accused her of cheating on a math test simply because she'd scored higher than her white classmates. "They'll always try to make you react, baby girl," her mother had whispered while stroking her hair. "Your composure is your power. Never let them see you break." That lesson had served Imani through medical school, through her residency where attending physicians mistook her for janitorial staff, and through boardrooms where investors initially directed questions to her white male subordinates. Composure was indeed power. The sound of a deep voice interrupted her thoughts. "Excuse me, but I noticed this lady has been trying to get some assistance." The businessman across the aisle had stood up, addressing Brenda, who happened to be passing by with fresh cookies for the passengers in row 1. Brenda's smile faltered slightly. "I'll be with her when I can," she replied dismissively. "We're short-staffed today." The businessman frowned. "She's been waiting for nearly half an hour. I don't see why that's acceptable." Brenda's expression hardened. "Sir, please return to your seat. I understand your concern, but interfering with flight crew duties can be considered disruptive behavior." The threat was thinly veiled. The businessman reluctantly sat down, shooting an apologetic glance toward Imani. Minutes later, the cabin speakers crackled to life. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Richard Sullivan speaking. We've received reports of disruptive behavior in the cabin. I want to remind all passengers that interfering with flight crew members is a federal offense. Let's ensure we have a peaceful journey to San Francisco." Imani felt dozens of eyes turn toward her section, passengers craning necks, to identify the problem. The weight of assumptions and prejudice settled heavily across her shoulders. Despite the humiliation, she maintained her dignified expression, opening her laptop to recreate as much of her presentation as memory would allow. Every few minutes, she caught Brenda whispering to other crew members while glancing in her direction. Once she clearly overheard, "Always make everything about race," followed by suppressed laughter. After completing what work she could, Imani pressed the call button once more. This time, she waited 25 minutes before Brenda appeared, sighing theatrically. "Yes?" she asked, as if Imani's existence was an inconvenience. "I'd like to speak with the head flight attendant, please," Imani requested calmly. Brenda's eyes narrowed. "I am the head flight attendant on this flight." "Then I'd like to register a complaint about the service I've received," Imani continued, her voice level. "I believe there's been a pattern of—" Brenda cut her off, voice suddenly loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "Ma'am, I need you to lower your voice and watch your tone. Threatening flight crew is unacceptable." Imani hadn't raised her voice at all. "I'm not threatening anyone," she replied, conscious of the audience Brenda was performing for. "I'm simply expressing concern about—" "This is exactly what I'm talking about," Brenda interrupted again, hands now on her hips. "This aggressive behavior cannot continue. Has something like this ever happened to you while traveling? Have you witnessed discrimination being disguised as customer service issues? Comment number 1 if you've experienced similar treatment while going about your daily life. Or number 2 if you've witnessed someone else being treated unfairly based on their race. Don't forget to hit that like button if you believe everyone deserves to be treated with dignity, regardless of their appearance, and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience in the face of injustice. How would you react in Dr. Reynolds' position? Would you maintain composure like she did, or would you immediately call out the discrimination? And what consequences would Brenda's false accusations trigger that would forever change both women's lives? With Brenda's accusation of aggressive behavior still hanging in the air, Imani felt the familiar weight of being unfairly villainized settling on her shoulders. What she didn't know was that while she returned to her laptop, attempting to salvage her presentation, Brenda had retreated to the galley with a calculated plan forming. Hidden from passengers' view, Brenda pulled out the flight's incident report form. Her pen hovered momentarily before she began writing, embellishing wildly. Female passenger in 2A repeatedly disrupted service, used threatening language, and attempted to intimidate crew members when requests couldn't be immediately accommodated, displayed signs of potential intoxication, recommend security meet aircraft upon arrival. Her colleague, a younger flight attendant named Tyler, peered over her shoulder. "Are you sure about this? I didn't see any threatening behavior from her." Brenda fixed him with a stern look. "You were serving in economy. Trust me, we can't have passengers thinking they can bully us. I'm following protocol." Tyler hesitated, but said nothing more. With flourish, Brenda signed the form and used the aircraft's communication system to forward the report to ground operations in San Francisco. Meanwhile, as the flight progressed into its second hour, Imani remained unaware of the storm brewing. She had managed to recreate most of her presentation and was reviewing financial projections when she felt a light tap on her shoulder. Turning, she found herself facing a middle-aged black woman from several rows back. "Excuse me," the woman whispered, leaning close. "I overheard the flight attendants talking. They've called ahead for security to meet the plane because of you." Imani's stomach dropped. "Security? For what possible reason?" The woman glanced nervously toward the galley. "The blonde one is saying you threatened her. I saw everything. You didn't do anything wrong. But I thought you should know." Before Imani could thank her, the woman hurried back to her seat, clearly afraid of being associated with the troublemaker. Hands trembling slightly, Imani pulled out her phone and began rapidly typing an email to her executive assistant. "Angela, situation developing on flight. Being falsely accused of threatening crew. Security reportedly meeting plane in SFO. Alert legal team immediately. May need representation at airport." She hesitated, then added, "Also, please let CFO know American Skyways investment discussion. May need reconsideration." As Imani pressed send, the plane hit a pocket of turbulence, causing her phone to slip from her grasp. When she bent to retrieve it, she noticed Brenda watching her intently from the galley, speaking into the aircraft phone with her eyes fixed on Imani. The plane's speakers crackled to life once more. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our initial descent into San Francisco International Airport. Flight attendants, prepare for landing." There was a brief pause before Captain Sullivan continued, his voice noticeably stiffer. "Upon arrival, we ask that all passengers remain seated until security personnel have boarded and completed their duties. We apologize for any inconvenience." A ripple of confused murmurs spread throughout the cabin. Nearby passengers glanced at each other, then invariably toward Imani, assumptions already forming in their minds. The businessman across the aisle leaned toward her. "Is everything all right?" "Apparently not," Imani replied quietly. "They've called security to meet the plane because of me." His eyebrows shot up. "That's ridiculous. You've done nothing wrong." "Unfortunately, that doesn't always matter," she responded, the weight of experience in her voice. As the plane descended, through the clouds, Imani straightened her suit jacket and mentally prepared for what was coming. She'd faced discrimination countless times throughout her remarkable career, during medical school, throughout her residency, in boardrooms across the country, but never had she been deemed dangerous enough to warrant law enforcement intervention. The landing was smooth, but tension filled the cabin as the aircraft taxied to the gate. The seatbelt sign remained illuminated long after they'd stopped moving. Through the windows, passengers could see 3 security officers in dark uniforms, approaching the jet bridge. Imani took a deep breath, closed her eyes briefly, and whispered her mother's words to herself. "Your composure is your power." The cabin door opened with a hydraulic hiss. 3 security officers stepped aboard, their faces stern and hands resting near their weapons. The lead officer spoke briefly with Brenda, who pointed directly at Imani, her expression a mixture of fear and satisfaction that turned Imani's stomach. "Seat 2A, she heard Brenda say. "She's been hostile the entire flight." The security officers moved with practiced efficiency through the first-class cabin, their heavy footsteps creating a rhythm of dread as they approached Seat 2A. Imani sat perfectly still, shoulders back, chin slightly raised, the posture of dignity her mother had taught her to maintain in the face of injustice. "Ma'am," the lead officer addressed her, his voice carrying throughout the now silent cabin. "We need you to gather your belongings and come with us." Imani looked directly into his eyes. "May I ask why I'm being removed from this aircraft?" The officer glanced at his clipboard. "We've received reports of disruptive behavior and threats made to the flight crew." "That's absolutely false," Imani replied calmly. "I've made no threats whatsoever." The businessman across the aisle stood up, despite the illuminated seatbelt. "Sign." "Officer, I've been seated across from this woman the entire flight. She's done nothing wrong. In fact, she's been treated poorly by the crew." A woman 2 rows back chimed in. "I saw everything too. She's been nothing but patient despite terrible service." The lead officer raised his hand. "Sir, ma'am, please return to your seats. This doesn't concern you." "Actually, it does concern us," a young woman called from row 4, holding up her phone. "Because it looks like racial profiling, and I've been recording since you walked in." The officer's expression hardened. "Recording security personnel is not permitted on this aircraft." "Actually," the young woman countered, "in California it's perfectly legal to record law enforcement in public spaces during the course of their duties." More phones appeared, cameras pointed toward the unfolding scene. Imani opened her purse and produced her business card. "My name is Dr. Imani Reynolds. I'm the CEO of MedTech Innovations. Here's my identification. I'd like to speak with your supervisor before this situation escalates further." The officer barely glanced at her credentials. "Ma'am, you need to come with us now. Don't make this more difficult than it needs to be." "I'm simply asking to speak with a supervisor," Imani repeated. "I've done nothing wrong." The lead officer nodded to his colleagues. Without warning, 2 officers grabbed Imani's arms, yanking her from her seat with such force that her laptop clattered to the floor. "Hey!" shouted the businessman across the aisle. "That's unnecessary. She's not resisting." Passengers threw out. The cabin began protesting loudly, but the officers continued. As they roughly pulled Imani into the aisle, one officer produced handcuffs. "This is completely unwarranted," Imani stated, her voice steady despite the chaos erupting around her. "I am not a threat to anyone." "Standard procedure," the officer replied flatly, seizing her wrists. The metal cuffs closed with a sharp click that seemed to echo throughout the cabin. Applied too tightly, the edge of one cuff immediately broke. Her skin, drawing blood that began to stain the cuff of her white blouse. The physical pain was nothing compared to the humiliation of being handled like a dangerous criminal. Phone cameras recorded every moment as security pulled her toward the exit. Her heels caught on the carpet, causing her to stumble. Rather than allowing her to regain her footing, the officers simply dragged her forward, creating a spectacle of degradation that would soon be viewed millions of times online. As they reached the aircraft door, Imani saw Brenda standing in the galley, arms crossed, a barely disguised smirk playing across her lips. Their eyes met briefly. Brenda's filled with vindictive satisfaction, Imani's with a calm promise that this injustice would not stand. The terminal was crowded with afternoon travelers, hundreds of witnesses to her humiliation. Business travelers lowered their phones mid-conversation, families stopped to stare, airport employees paused their duties, all watching as a professionally dressed black woman was marched through the terminal in handcuffs, blood now visibly dripping from her wrist. "I want to speak to your supervisor immediately," Imani stated again, loud enough for bystanders to hear. "I also want to call my attorney. This is false arrest and racial discrimination." "You can make calls after processing," one officer replied, dismissively. "Right now you're interfering with airport security, which is a federal offense." A small crowd had begun following them through the terminal, many filming with their phones. The videos would later show Imani walking with remarkable poise despite the circumstances. head held high even as blood continued to seep from beneath the metal restraint. As they approached a door marked Airport Security Authorized Personnel Only, Imani made one final attempt. Under federal law, I have the right to know the specific charges against me and to contact legal representation before questioning. The officers exchanged glances, clearly unaccustomed to detainees who knew their rights so thoroughly. "Ma'am, you'll have the opportunity to make your case inside," the lead officer said, pushing open the door. Before being led through, Imani turned toward the growing crowd of witnesses, making direct eye contact with those filming. It was a calculated move, ensuring her face would be clearly visible in the footage, humanizing her in what would soon become viral content across social media platforms. As the heavy door closed behind them, cutting her off from public view, Imani had no way of knowing that her ordeal was just beginning. The airline's powerful corporate machine was already spinning into action, determined to protect its reputation regardless of the cost to her dignity, career, or personal safety. Inside the sterile interrogation room, Imani Reynolds refused to be broken. "I will not be walking anywhere with you until these handcuffs are removed," she stated firmly, as the security officers attempted to guide her toward a metal chair. The lead officer's face tightened with frustration. "Ma'am, you need to cooperate or what?" Imani challenged, her voice steady. "You'll add more false charges? I'm bleeding because these handcuffs were applied improperly and with excessive force. I want them removed now." The officers exchanged uncertain glances, clearly unaccustomed to such composed defiance. When they hesitated, Imani added, "Every second these restraints remain is another second documented in what will become a very public lawsuit." With reluctance, the lead officer produced a key and removed the handcuffs. Imani immediately examined her wrist, where an angry red welt had formed, blood seeping from where the metal had broken skin. Outside the interrogation room, a commotion was building. Through the small window in the door, Imani could see passengers from her flight gathering. In the hallway, many still recording with their phones. "You can't detain her without cause," a voice shouted, the businessman from across the aisle. Security personnel attempted to disperse the growing crowd, but the witnesses remained steadfast. "We saw everything," another passenger called out. "This is discrimination." Meanwhile, in the terminal, the videos were already spreading. A college student who had captured the entire removal sequence had immediately uploaded it with the caption, "Black female CEO dragged off American Skyways flight for literally nothing. Blood on her clothes. Flying while black, American Skyways shame." The clip was being shared thousands of times per minute. Back in the interrogation room, one of the officers placed a form on the table. "You need to sign this admission of disruptive behavior. It's standard procedure." Imani didn't even glance at the document. "I will be signing nothing without my attorney present." She locked eyes with the lead officer. "And I need my phone. Call now." When the officer appeared ready to refuse, she added, "Unless you're planning to formally arrest me, in which case I should remind you that false arrest carries significant penalties, especially when motivated by racial bias." Her years in corporate boardrooms had taught her how to project authority even when outnumbered. The lead officer slid her confiscated phone across the table. "One call." Imani nodded, quickly dialing her CFO, Marcus Chen. She put the call on speaker, ensuring the officers would hear every word. "Marcus, it's Imani. I'm being illegally detained at San Francisco International by airport security after being removed from American Skyways Flight 3429. She spoke clearly and precisely. "I was racially profiled by a flight attendant named Brenda, who filed a false report claiming I was threatening. I was publicly humiliated, physically assaulted, and am currently bleeding from improperly applied handcuffs." Marcus's voice came through immediately concerned. "Are you okay? Do you need medical attention?" "What I need," Imani replied, her eyes never leaving the increasingly uncomfortable officers, "is for you to execute Protocol 7 regarding American Skyways. Effective immediately." There was a brief pause before Marcus responded. "The entire $4 billion?" "All of it," Imani confirmed. "And contact Elijah Montgomery's office. I'll need legal representation here as soon as possible. Already on it, Marcus assured her. Catherine already has the social media response team monitoring the situation. Videos of your removal are trending nationally. As Imani ended the call, the door to the interrogation room burst open. A flustered airport administrator entered, followed by a woman in an American Skyways executive uniform. Officers, there appears to have been a misunderstanding, the administrator announced, his forehead sheened with nervous sweat. Dr. Reynolds is free to go. The airline representative stepped forward with a practiced smile. Dr. Reynolds, on behalf of American Skyways, I want to express our deepest apologies for this unfortunate incident. We would like to offer you immediate first-class accommodation on our next flight to San Francisco, along with compensation for your inconvenience. Imani slowly stood, straightening her blood-stained blouse. Unfortunate incident? She repeated, her voice dangerously quiet. Is that how your airline characterizes racial profiling, false accusations, physical assault, and public humiliation? The representative's smile faltered. We're prepared to offer a very generous settlement package. If we could just handle this matter privately. I'm sure you are, Imani interrupted. But it's far too late for that. She walked toward the door, then turned back. You might want to check your company's stock price. I believe it's about to experience significant turbulence. As she exited the room to applause from the gathered witnesses, her phone rang. The screen displayed, Theodore Wilson, CEO, American Skyways. Imani declined the call with a swipe of her finger, leaving bloody fingerprints on the screen, a visual metaphor for the stain this incident would leave on the airline's reputation. Have you ever witnessed someone standing up against injustice despite being in a vulnerable position? Comment number 1 if you believe Dr. Reynolds was right to refuse the airline's quick settlement offer, or number 2, if you think she should have accepted it to avoid further conflict. If you believe corporations should be held accountable for discrimination, hit that like button and subscribe to see more stories of individuals fighting back against systemic racism. What do you think American Skyways will do next to try controlling this rapidly escalating situation? And just how far will they go to protect their reputation as Dr. Reynolds' story begins spreading across social media? Imani's departure from the security area marked only the beginning of her fight. Though technically free to go, she found herself stranded at the airport, her luggage still aboard the plane that had continued to San Francisco without her. Her laptop, containing crucial presentation materials, remained in the hands of airport security, deemed evidence despite the rapidly crumbling case against her. In a quiet corner of the terminal, Imani found a moment to collect herself. Giselle closed her eyes, memories flooding back of her father's voice when she'd faced racism as a medical resident. Remember who you are, Imani, he'd told her after a patient had refused to be treated by a black doctor. Your grandfather picked cotton so your mother could go to school. Your mother cleaned houses so you could become a doctor. Their strength flows through your veins. That ancestral strength steadied her now as she dabbed at her wounded wrist with napkins from a nearby coffee stand. Her phone buzzed continuously with notifications as the videos of her removal went viral. News outlets were already reaching out for statements. She ignored them, focusing instead on a text from Marcus. Protocol 7 initiated. Full 4B investment withdrawn. Legal team en route. PR crisis team activated. A small smile played across her lips. Protocol 7, named after the 7 incidents of discrimination she'd faced while building MedTech, was their company's response to corporate partners who engaged in discriminatory practices. It meant immediate termination of all financial relationships, no second chances. For American Skyways, it meant the evaporation of a desperately needed $4 billion lifeline. Imani was about to respond when 2 airport security officers approached, notably different from those who had detained her earlier. Dr. Reynolds, one said respectfully, we need to ask you a few more questions about the incident. My attorney will be arriving shortly, Imani replied. I'll answer questions in their presence. Ma'am, we're trying to conduct a thorough investigation, the officer insisted. The flight attendant, Brenda Morrison, has provided a detailed statement claiming you verbally threatened her after she accidentally spilled coffee on your documents. Accidentally? Imani repeated incredulously. And I suppose she accidentally ignored my request for service throughout the flight? Accidentally called me aggressive when I spoke in a normal tone? Accidentally smirked as I was dragged away in handcuffs? The officers exchanged glances. We're just trying to get the facts straight. The facts are on dozens of passengers' phones, Imani replied firmly. I suggest you review that footage, rather than taking the word of someone who filed a demonstrably false report. As if proving her point, her phone buzzed with another notification. A passenger from the flight had tagged her in a video clearly showing Brenda deliberately tilting the coffee pot over Imani's documents while maintaining eye contact. Imani turned the screen toward the officers. Does this look accidental to you? The younger officer shifted uncomfortably. Ma'am, we'll need to confiscate your phone as evidence. Absolutely not, Imani stated, pulling the device away. This is private property. If you want this video, I suggest you find the passenger who posted it publicly. Before the confrontation could escalate, a tall man in an impeccable suit approached, flanked by two associates. Dr. Reynolds, he called out. Elijah Montgomery, your legal counsel. I advise you not to answer any further questions. The lead security officer straightened. Sir, we're conducting an official investigation. Montgomery smiled thinly. Into what exactly? The wrongful detention of one of the country's most respected medical innovators based on the demonstrably false claims of an airline employee with a documented history of racial bias? He turned to Imani. My team has already pulled Ms. Morrison's employment records. This isn't her first complaint involving passengers of color. The officer's demeanor changed instantly. We'll need to review all the evidence before drawing conclusions, the senior officer said, backing away slightly. Of course, Montgomery replied, and we'll be happy to provide that evidence to the federal investigation into discriminatory practices at both this security department and American Skyways that we'll be requesting tomorrow morning. As the officers retreated, the terminal doors opened to reveal a woman in an American Skyways corporate uniform, walking briskly toward them. Dr. Reynolds, she called, slightly out of breath. I'm Jennifer Okafor, Vice President of Customer Relations at American Skyways. Our CEO has authorized me to offer you our most sincere apologies and immediate compensation of $200,000 if we can resolve this matter promptly. Montgomery stepped forward. My client will not be discussing any settlements at this time. Okafor's professional smile faltered. We're prepared to go to $500,000, with a non-disclosure agreement, of course. Imani gazed steadily at the airline representative. Ms. Okafor, your airline had a $4 billion opportunity with my company. That partnership is now permanently dissolved. Do you really think a few $100,000 will fix this? Okafor's composure cracked slightly. Dr. Reynolds, I understand you're upset, but perhaps we should discuss this privately. There will be nothing private about this matter, Imani interrupted. Your employee racially profiled me, falsely accused me, and had me publicly humiliated. The consequences of those actions will be equally public. As if on cue, Imani's phone rang. The caller ID displayed GNN News Network. Montgomery nodded. I believe this would be an excellent time to share your experience with the public, Dr. Reynolds. As Imani accepted the call that would broadcast her story to millions, she was unaware that in the American Skyways corporate headquarters, CEO Theodore Wilson was calling an emergency board meeting that would set in motion a vicious counterattack designed to destroy her reputation and save the airline from financial ruin. The true depth of corporate corruption she was about to face would make her airport detention seem like merely the opening skirmish in a much larger war. Theodore Wilson slammed his fist on the polished mahogany table of American Skyways' executive boardroom. $4 billion. Gone. His face had turned an alarming shade of crimson as he glared at the executives gathered for the emergency meeting. All because some flight attendant couldn't keep her prejudices in check for one goddamn flight. The airline's chief financial officer cleared his throat nervously. It's worse than that, sir. We're already seeing ticket cancellations. Social media is on fire. Our boycott American Skyways is trending nationwide. Wilson loosened his tie, a vein pulsing visibly at his temple. Get me Brenda Morrison, now. 20 minutes later, a visibly shaken Brenda was escorted into the boardroom by security. Her uniform, so crisply worn during the flight, now appeared rumpled, her confident demeanor replaced by nervous glances at the stern-faced executives surrounding her. "Ms. Morrison," Wilson began with dangerous calm, "you've cost this company $4 billion and potentially hundreds of millions more in lost business. Please explain yourself." Brenda's lower lip trembled. She was being difficult. "Difficult?" Wilson cut her off. "We've seen the videos, Ms. Morrison. All of them, including the one showing you deliberately pouring coffee on her documents while making eye contact." Brenda paled. "I didn't realize passengers were recording." "Clearly," Wilson interrupted again. "Now, here's what's going to happen. You're going to sign a statement that we've prepared." He slid a document across the table. Brenda scanned it, her eyes widening. "This says I was stressed from personal problems and that Dr. Reynolds never threatened me or acted inappropriately. This makes it look like everything was my fault." Wilson smiled thinly. "Everything was your fault. But if you sign this, we'll provide you with a modest severance package instead of firing you for cause and pursuing damages." Brenda's hands shook as she realized her position. "And if I don't sign, then you'll be solely responsible for the financial damages to this airline," the legal director stated flatly. "We estimate that could exceed $500 million. Cornered, Brenda signed the document with a shaking hand. "Smart choice," Wilson said, taking the paper. "Security will escort you to clear out your locker. You'll never work in aviation again." After Brenda left, Wilson turned to his executive team. "That document goes in a drawer. It never sees the light of day." He straightened his tie. "Now here's what we're actually going to do. Our story is that Dr. Reynolds was intoxicated on the flight, became verbally abusive when denied additional alcohol, and threatened our staff. We'll claim the videos circulating have been selectively edited to remove her bad behavior." The PR director looked uncertain. "Sir, there are multiple witnesses contradicting that version. Find passengers who will support our story," Wilson commanded. "First-class upgrades for life should loosen some tongues. For those who refuse, we have other methods of persuasion." He turned to his legal director. "What do we know about Dr. Reynolds?" "She's squeaky clean," came the reluctant response. "Harvard Medical School, Mayo Clinic residency, revolutionized cancer treatment protocols, built medtech from nothing into a $47 billion company. Philanthropist, mentors underprivileged youth, sits on multiple non-profit boards." Wilson scowled. "Everyone has skeletons. Dig deeper. Tax irregularities, personal indiscretions, questionable research methods. I don't care what you find, but find something." The marketing director hesitantly raised a hand. "Sir, perhaps we should consider a genuine apology? The evidence against us is overwhelming." Wilson silenced him with a glare. "An apology is an admission of guilt. Guilt leads to lawsuits. Lawsuits lead to bankruptcy. We're fighting this with everything we've got." He stood, straightening his custom suit. "Release our statement claiming Reynolds was intoxicated. Get our media allies to run with it. Pay for prime ad placement to ensure our version appears first in search results. I want our side of the story to drown out hers." As the executives dispersed to execute his orders, Wilson remained alone in the boardroom, staring at the airline's stock ticker on the wall-mounted screen, already down 12% and falling fast. His phone rang, the fourth call in an hour from major investors threatening to pull out. This wasn't just about $4 billion anymore. The entire airline and his $20 million annual compensation package hung in the balance. He picked up his secure line and dialed a number few knew existed. "It's Wilson," he said when the call connected. "I need the special containment team. Full deployment. Highest priority. The target is Imani Reynolds of MedTech Innovations." He listened briefly to the response. "Yes, I understand the cost. Do it anyway. This is existential." As he hung up, Wilson didn't allow himself to consider the ethical implications of what he'd just authorized. In his mind, this was simply business, the protection of a multi-billion-dollar corporation against a threat. The fact that the threat was an innocent black woman who had been wronged by his company was irrelevant to him. The machinery he'd just set in motion, a sophisticated network of private investigators, former intelligence operatives, media manipulators, and digital saboteurs, would stop at almost nothing to discredit and destroy Dr. Imani Reynolds. What Wilson couldn't know was that Imani Reynolds had spent a lifetime preparing for exactly this kind of fight, and she had resources and allies of her own that would soon make him regret the war he had just declared. Imani Reynolds adjusted her blouse to hide the bloodstains as the GNN camera crew finished setting up in the airport conference room her legal team had commandeered. Her wrist throbbed where the handcuffs had cut into her skin, but she projected nothing but poise as the red light on the camera illuminated. We're speaking live with Dr. Imani Reynolds, CEO of MedTech Innovations, who was forcibly removed from an American Skyways flight earlier today, the anchor began. Dr. Reynolds, can you tell us what happened? With measured calm, Imani recounted the events, her composed demeanor contrasting sharply with the severity of her allegations. I was targeted, falsely accused, publicly humiliated, and physically injured, all because a flight attendant decided that a black woman in first class needed to be put in her place. The interview was barely underway when American Skyways issued its counter-statement, which the anchor reluctantly read aloud. American Skyways regrets the incident involving Dr. Reynolds, who appeared to be under the influence of alcohol and became verbally abusive when our crew followed FAA regulations regarding service to intoxicated passengers. Imani's expression never wavered. I don't drink alcohol, at all, ever. It's a personal choice I've maintained my entire adult life, and anyone who knows me can verify that fact. She reached into her bag and withdrew a small black device. Fortunately, I don't need to rely on my word alone. The anchor leaned forward. What's that device, Dr. Reynolds? This is my personal security recorder, Imani explained. As a black woman in a leadership position, I've learned to document my interactions, particularly in situations where I might face discrimination. She pressed a button, and crystal-clear audio filled the room. Imani's calm request for sparkling water, Brenda's curt response, the long wait, the crash of the coffee cart, Brenda's insincere mistake comment, and every subsequent interaction, all captured with perfect clarity. I've been wearing this device since a venture capitalist inappropriately touched me during a funding meeting 3 years ago, and then denied it happened, Imani explained. The recording continues through my detention, including when security officers applied handcuffs so tightly they broke my skin. The anchor appeared momentarily speechless. You have the entire incident recorded? Every second, Imani confirmed, and I'm authorizing its complete release to all media outlets immediately following this interview. As if on cue, Elijah Montgomery entered the frame, handing Imani a tablet. Dr. Reynolds, you might want to see this. American Skyways stock has fallen 27% since trading opened after news of the incident broke. The camera captured the information in real time, the dramatic red graph showing the airline's financial freefall. Meanwhile, across all social media platforms, "Do Justice for Imani" had surged to the top trending spot worldwide. The interview's live viewer count had exploded to over 12 million, an unprecedented number for a midday news segment. Videos of Imani's removal were being shared once every 3 seconds. Then, something unexpected happened. The GNN feed split to include a second window, where Brenda Morrison sat in what appeared to be a hastily arranged studio. We're now joined by Brenda Morrison, the flight attendant involved in this incident, the anchor announced, clearly surprised by the development. Ms. Morrison, American Skyways claims Dr. Reynolds was intoxicated. Can you confirm that? Brenda appeared nervous, her eyes darting occasionally off camera. Dr. Reynolds was exhibiting behaviors consistent with intoxication. She became agitated when Imani's voice cut through calmly. Ms. Morrison, are you aware that I just played an audio recording of our entire interaction on national television? Brenda blanched visibly. I haven't heard any recording. It clearly demonstrates that I was professional throughout. While you deliberately spilled coffee on my documents, ignored my requests for assistance, and falsely accused me of aggression, Imani continued. I'm curious, Did American Skyways executives coach you on what to say in this interview? Brenda's expression crumbled. Off camera, a male voice could be heard hissing, "Stick to the script." The anchor, sensing a breaking point, pressed further. "Ms. Morrison, were you instructed to make false statements about Dr. Reynolds?" For a moment, the only sound was Brenda's shaky breathing. Then, in a barely audible voice, she said, "They said I'd lose everything if I didn't blame her." The feed from Brenda's location abruptly cut off. The anchor, visibly shaken, turned back to Imani. "Dr. Reynolds, your response?" "I think that speaks for itself," Imani replied calmly. "This isn't just about one flight attendant's actions. This is about systemic discrimination and a corporate culture that would rather destroy an innocent person's reputation than admit wrongdoing." As the interview concluded, Imani's phone chimed with an alert. American Skyways had just released a doctored video purporting to show her behaving aggressively on the flight. The manipulation was obvious: choppy edits, mismatched audio, inconsistent lighting. It was a desperate move from a desperate corporation. Within minutes, technical experts on social media were highlighting the dozens of telltale signs of manipulation. Rather than damaging Imani's credibility, the fake video only further galvanized public support for her cause and intensified scrutiny of the airline. When Imani finally stepped away from the cameras, Elijah Montgomery approached with a grave expression. "They're getting desperate," he warned. "And desperate corporations are dangerous." Wilson has reportedly activated what they call their Special Containment Team, essentially corporate mercenaries who specialize in character assassination. Imani nodded, unsurprised. "Then we'd better release everything we have now. The complete audio recording, the testimonials from passengers, the documentation of my injury, all of it." "Are you sure?" Montgomery asked. "We could hold some back strategically." "When facing an opponent with no ethical boundaries," Imani replied, "transparency becomes your greatest weapon." As her legal team executed her instructions, releasing the damning evidence to every major news outlet simultaneously, American Skyways' desperate counterattack was about to backfire spectacularly. Their doctored video wouldn't just fail, it would become the catalyst for a federal investigation into corporate fraud that would expose decades of discriminatory practices across the entire airline industry. Have you ever caught someone in a lie that completely destroyed their credibility? Comment number 1. If you think American Skyways' attempt to doctor video evidence will completely backfire. Or number 2, if you believe major corporations usually get away with such tactics. If you're inspired by Dr. Reynolds' preparedness in recording her interactions, hit that like button and subscribe to see more stories about fighting injustice with intelligence and foresight. What do you think will happen next in this escalating battle between a principled individual and a powerful corporation willing to cross ethical lines? Will American Skyways face legal consequences for falsifying evidence, or will they find an even more dangerous way to silence Dr. Reynolds? The mahogany-paneled courtroom fell silent as Judge Eleanor Harrington entered, her stern gaze sweeping across the assembled attorneys. The case of Reynolds versus American Skyways had moved with unprecedented speed to the federal court, bypassing months of typical procedural delays. On one side sat Imani, composed in a tailored Navy suit, flanked by Elijah Montgomery and his team of civil rights attorneys. On the other, American Skyways' battalion of corporate lawyers led by Richard Phelps, known in legal circles as the Terminator for his ruthless dismantling of plaintiffs. "Your Honor," Phelps began, rising smoothly to his feet, "we move for an immediate gag order preventing Dr. Reynolds from making further public statements about this matter. Her inflammatory remarks have already caused irreparable harm to American Skyways' reputation and stock value." Montgomery stood, adjusting his glasses. "Your Honor, this is a transparent attempt to silence the victim of racial discrimination. Dr. Reynolds has merely shared her factual experience, supported by audio recordings and witness testimony." Judge Harrington frowned. "Mr. Phelps, the First Amendment implications here are significant." "We're not disputing Dr. Reynolds' right to speak generally, Your Honor," Phelps countered. "But her specific allegations of systematic racial discrimination, backed by her considerable public platform as a successful CEO, constitute harmful speech not protected when it causes demonstrable financial damage. The argument continued for hours, legal precedents flying back and forth across the courtroom. Meanwhile, Imani sat perfectly still, her expression revealing nothing as her character and integrity were dissected by strangers. During a brief recess, Montgomery approached Imani in the hallway. "Several board members from MedTech have called," he said quietly. "They're concerned about potential blowback affecting company valuation." Imani's jaw tightened imperceptibly. "They want me to settle." "They didn't say that explicitly," Montgomery hedged, but the implication was clear. They're worried about a protracted legal battle affecting investor confidence. Imani gazed out the window at the assembled media below. "This was never just about me, Elijah. If I back down now, nothing changes. The next black executive, doctor, or attorney who boards that airline faces the same discrimination. The cycle continues." When court reconvened, Judge Harrington delivered her ruling. "After careful consideration, I'm granting a limited gag order. While the case proceeds, neither party may make public statements specifically addressing evidence or legal strategy. However, Dr. Reynolds retains the right to discuss her personal experience of the events in question." Phelps immediately objected. "Your Honor, that distinction is meaningless. Her personal experience is precisely what's damaging my client. Perhaps your client should have considered that before dragging a paying customer off an airplane in handcuffs, Mr. Phelps," Judge Harrington replied dryly. "My ruling stands." As the proceedings continued, an anonymous envelope arrived at Montgomery's office. His assistant rushed it to the courthouse, passing it to him just as Phelps was presenting American Skyway's motion to dismiss. Montgomery's eyes widened as he scanned the contents. "Your Honor, I request permission to approach the bench with opposing counsel." Judge Harrington nodded, and both attorneys moved forward. "Your Honor," Montgomery said quietly, "I've just received internal communications from American Skyways revealing a pattern of racial profiling directives from senior management. These documents instruct crew members to exercise additional scrutiny for passengers fitting certain demographic profiles, including, and I quote, well-dressed minorities who may be attempting to fraudulently access premium services." Phelps blanched. "This is the first I'm hearing of these alleged documents. We demand time to authenticate." "They're authenticated by the electronic signature of Theodore Wilson himself," Montgomery interrupted, "and there are dozens more documenting a systematic policy of discrimination." When they returned to their tables, Phelps huddled with his team in tense whispers. One associate frantically typed on his phone, presumably alerting airline executives to the devastating development. Outside the courtroom, a different battle was unfolding. American Skyways had hired a top crisis management firm that was working overtime to reframe the narrative. Conservative media outlets began running segments questioning Imani's character, suggesting she had orchestrated the incident for financial gain or publicity. Anonymous sources claimed she had a history of playing the race card when faced with business setbacks. More disturbing were the death threats. Imani's security team intercepted packages containing nooses sent to her office. Her home address was posted on extremist message boards. MedTech's servers faced constant cyber attacks attempting to access sensitive information about her personal life, finances, and medical research. Late that evening, as Imani was reviewing case documents in her hotel suite, her phone rang. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize. "Dr. Reynolds." Distorted voice greeted her. "I suggest you check your email immediately." The line went dead. Opening her secure email, Imani found a message containing detailed information about her teenage daughter's boarding school schedule, daily routine, and security vulnerabilities. The message contained one line of text. "Even the strongest mothers have breaking points." Imani's hand trembled slightly as she called Montgomery. "They're threatening my daughter," she said without preamble. "This just got even more personal." "We'll move her immediately. Change her identity temporarily," Montgomery assured her. "But Imani, you need to know. This means we're winning. They wouldn't resort to these tactics otherwise." After ensuring her daughter's safety, Imani made a decision. The next morning as she entered the courthouse, She approached the prosecutor who had been observing the civil proceedings. "I want to file criminal charges," she stated. "Not just against the airline, but against Theodore Wilson personally. This has escalated beyond civil damages. This is criminal harassment, intimidation, and exploitation of private data." The prosecutor nodded gravely. "With what you've shown me, we have grounds to proceed. But Dr. Reynolds, you should know, once we go this route, there's no turning back. The full force of corporate America will align against you." Imani straightened her shoulders. "Then they'll learn what I'm truly made of." The executive conference room at American Skyway's headquarters had been converted into a war room. Maps, charts, and photographs covered the walls, all focusing on one target: Dr. Imani Reynolds. Theodore Wilson paced before his crisis team, his custom Italian shoes wearing a path in the plush carpet. "How did those documents leak?" he demanded, slamming his fist on the table. "Those were executives-only communications." The head of IT security cleared his throat nervously. "We've traced the breach, sir. Someone accessed them using Executive Vice President Catherine Lawson's credentials." All eyes turned to Lawson, a statuesque woman in her 50s who had opposed the airline's handling of the incident from the beginning. "Catherine," Wilson's voice was dangerously soft. "Care to explain?" Lawson met his gaze unflinchingly. "I didn't leak anything, Theodore. But I'm not surprised someone did. What we're doing is wrong, legally and morally." "Your ethical objections are noted," Wilson replied coldly. "And your access to all systems is hereby revoked pending investigation. Security will escort you out." As guards led Lawson away, Wilson turned to his remaining executives. "We need to contain this. Now." "Sir," the CFO interjected, "our stock has dropped 47%. Major institutional investors are threatening to pull out completely. Perhaps we should consider a genuine settlement." "Absolutely not," Wilson snapped. "A settlement admits guilt. Guilt invites additional lawsuits from every minority passenger who's ever had a bad flight experience. We'd be bankrupt within a year." He pointed to a photograph of Imani. "We need to focus on discrediting her completely. Everyone has a price or a pressure point." The head of corporate intelligence, a former federal agent, stepped forward. "Sir, we've compiled a comprehensive profile on Dr. Reynolds. Harvard Medical School, Mayo Clinic residency, revolutionary cancer research, widowed when her husband died of leukemia 5 years ago. One daughter currently at boarding school in Switzerland. We've had to suspend surveillance there after security was increased. What about financial irregularities, sexual indiscretions, research fraud?" Wilson pressed. "Nothing, sir. She's meticulously ethical, lives modestly despite her wealth, donates 30% of her income to medical research and educational foundations for underprivileged youth." Wilson's face darkened. "Everyone has skeletons. Dig deeper." "Sir," the intelligence chief hesitated, "we've already deployed methods that skirt the boundaries of legality. Going further would cross into explicitly criminal territory." "Then cross it," Wilson hissed. "Whatever it takes." Across town, in Montgomery's law offices, Imani sat surrounded by a growing team of allies. Former American Skyway's employees had come forward with their own stories of corporate discrimination and evidence of systematic racial profiling. Most significant was Brenda Morrison herself, who had arrived under cover of darkness after being abandoned by the airline. "They promised to protect me," Brenda explained, her voice shaking. "But once the recordings came out proving I'd lied, they told me I was on my own. Mr. Wilson personally called to say I'd be financially destroyed if I didn't continue to support the company narrative." Imani studied the flight attendant who had caused her so much pain. "Why did you target me on that flight, Ms. Morrison? The truth, please." Brenda couldn't meet her eyes. "We receive quarterly bonuses based on passenger surveys. First-class white passengers consistently give higher ratings to crew who maintain a certain environment." "An environment without people who look like me," Imani finished. Brenda nodded miserably. "There's more. Flight crews receive briefings on passengers of special interest before premium flights. Your name was on that list." Montgomery leaned forward. American Skyways specifically flagged Dr. Reynolds before she even boarded? Yes, Brenda confirmed. The briefing identified her as potentially difficult and recommended careful handling. It's a code we all recognize. It means the passenger is non-white and should be watched closely. This revelation exploded across the legal landscape. Judge Harrington ordered American Skyways to produce all passenger briefings for the previous 5 years. The airline's lawyers scrambled to block the motion, claiming trade secrets and security protocols. But the judge was unmoved. Meanwhile, the corporate pressure on Imani intensified. A major investor in medtech, who also held significant American Skyways stock, called for an emergency board meeting to discuss leadership stability during times of public controversy. Though the motion to remove Imani as CEO was defeated, the message was clear. Powerful interests wanted this lawsuit to disappear. Then came the ultimate test. Late one evening, as Imani worked in her temporary office, a familiar figure appeared at her door. Dr. Reynolds, Theodore Wilson greeted her, impeccably dressed despite the late hour. I believe it's time we spoke. Directly. Montgomery had warned her this might happen and advised against meeting Wilson alone. But Imani had insisted on having a recording device ready for precisely this scenario. Mr. Wilson, she acknowledged, gesturing to a chair across from her desk. An unexpected visit. Wilson sat down, smoothing his tie. I'll be direct. This situation has escalated beyond what either of us intended. It's damaging both our companies. Your company assaulted me, falsely accused me, threatened my child, and attempted to destroy my reputation, Imani replied calmly. I didn't intend any of this. Water under the bridge, Wilson waved dismissively. I'm here to offer you $50 million to end this today. No admission of wrongdoing, mutual non-disparagement agreements, completely confidential. Imani raised an eyebrow. $50 million to allow systemic discrimination to continue unchecked? $100 million, Wilson countered smoothly. And a seat on our board of directors. You could change the company from within. When Imani didn't immediately respond, Wilson leaned forward. Dr. Reynolds, surely you understand the forces aligned against you. This isn't just about one airline anymore. Industries across America are watching this case with concern. No corporation wants employees thinking they can challenge institutional practices and win. So this is bigger than American Skyways, Imani observed. Much bigger, Wilson confirmed, apparently mistaking her comment for understanding. Major corporate donors are already pressuring lawmakers. Judicial appointments could be affected. Media coverage is being carefully managed. This can end one of two ways. You accept a generous settlement and move on with your life and career, or... He let the sentence hang unfinished. Or what, Mr. Wilson? Imani prompted. Wilson's mask of civility slipped. Or we will systematically dismantle everything you've built. Your company, your reputation, your research. All of it will be destroyed. Not because we're right and you're wrong, but because we have the power to do it. Imani stood slowly. Thank you for your candor, Mr. Wilson. It's rare to hear the threat of corrupt power articulated so clearly. My answer is no. Wilson's face hardened. You're making a catastrophic mistake. Actually, Imani replied, reaching into her desk drawer and removing her recording device. I believe you just did. Wilson's eyes widened as he realized his explicit threats had been captured. Before he could respond, Montgomery entered with 2 federal agents. Theodore Wilson, one agent announced. You're under investigation for witness intimidation, conspiracy to obstruct justice, and corporate racketeering. We have a warrant to seize all communications devices in your possession. As Wilson was escorted out, ashen-faced and silent, Montgomery turned to Imani. That recording changes everything. The judge has scheduled an emergency hearing for tomorrow morning. What neither of them knew was that Wilson had made one desperate call before the agents confiscated his phone. A call that would set in motion events that would shock the nation and push Imani to her breaking point. The morning headline stunned America. Captain Sullivan found dead. Suicide note alleges airline conspiracy. Richard Sullivan, the pilot who had announced the security response on Imani's flight, had been discovered in his suburban home, an apparent self-inflicted gunshot wound to his head. Beside him lay a detailed letter describing years of American Skyways' discriminatory practices and his own complicity in them. "I can no longer live with what we've become," the letter read in part. "We were instructed to treat certain passengers differently based solely on their race. When they complained, we were trained to use terms like aggressive or intoxicated to justify our actions. Dr. Reynolds was just the latest victim of a system designed to maintain an environment certain white passengers expect." The suicide note included names, dates, and specific incidents, a devastating insider account of institutional racism. News vans surrounded the airline's headquarters, where employees arrived to find doors locked and security guards turning them away. American Skyways stock, already severely damaged, plunged to historic lows within hours of trading. In the midst of this chaos, Imani received devastating news of her own. The major pharmaceutical company partnering with MedTech on their revolutionary cancer treatment had suddenly pulled out, citing controversy concerns. Without their manufacturing capacity, the life-saving therapy that had been Imani's life's work would be delayed by years, potentially costing thousands of lives. "It's not a coincidence," Montgomery confirmed grimly when Imani called him. "The CEO of that pharmaceutical company sits on 3 boards with major American Skyways investors. They're cutting off your research funding to force you to settle." For the first time since the ordeal began, Imani felt her resolve waver. Her legal fight was no longer just affecting her. It was impacting patients who might die waiting for treatment her company could provide. "They're willing to let people die to protect their corporate power structure," she whispered, the full weight of what she was facing finally hitting her. "It gets worse," Montgomery added reluctantly. "The federal prosecutor has been suddenly reassigned. His replacement is suggesting there's insufficient evidence to pursue criminal charges against Wilson or the airline." The system was closing ranks to protect its own. Corporate interests, political connections, and media manipulation were aligning against a single individual who dared to challenge them. That evening, as Imani sat alone in her hotel room contemplating the impossible choice before her, justice or lives, her phone rang. "Dr. Reynolds," a familiar voice greeted. "Her is Quatrin Lawson, former executive VP at American Skyways." "Ms. Lawson," Imani acknowledged. "I heard you were terminated." "Sacrificed is more accurate," Lawson replied. "But that's not important now. What matters is that I have access to something you need. Theodore Wilson's private server." Imani sat up straighter. "I'm listening." "Before I was escorted out, I copied his entire drive. Internal memos, board presentations, private communications, everything showing a decade-long pattern of discrimination codified into corporate policy." "Why would you risk this?" Imani asked. There was a pause before Lawson answered. "My grandmother couldn't sit at lunch counters. My mother had to use separate water fountains. I've spent my career being the acceptable black woman in corporate America, keeping my head down while watching people who look like us be systematically mistreated. I'm done being complicit." The evidence Lawson provided was explosive. Wilson had personally authored memos instructing crew to create excuse incidents for removing passengers whose appearance doesn't align with our premium brand identity. Other documents revealed a point system crew members used to receive bonuses for maintaining passenger comfort levels, a thinly veiled metric for ensuring predominantly white spaces in first class. Most damning was an email thread between Wilson and several other airline CEOs discussing the demographic management problem across the industry and sharing tactics for discouraging certain passenger profiles without triggering discrimination. Suits. Judge Harrington moved swiftly after reviewing the evidence, issuing an unprecedented ruling that opened American Skyways' internal records to public scrutiny and certified a class action lawsuit representing hundreds of minority passengers with similar experiences. The airline's collapse accelerated. Credit rating agencies downgraded their debt to junk status. Aircraft leasing companies began repossessing planes. The Department of Transportation launched a formal investigation into civil rights violations across the airline industry. Theodore Wilson resigned in disgrace, but not before making one final vindictive move, calling Imani's research partner personally and revealing that her husband's leukemia treatment had been part of an experimental protocol with manipulated data. The implication was clear. If Imani continued pursuing the lawsuit, he would claim her groundbreaking cancer research was based on fraudulent studies, potentially destroying her scientific legacy. Montgomery found Imani staring out her office window that evening, the city lights blurring through unshed tears. "They've taken everything," she said quietly. "My company's partnerships, my research funding, and now they're threatening my life's work and my husband's memory." "You could still take the settlement," Montgomery suggested gently. "No one would blame you." Imani turned to face him, wiping away a single tear. "My grandmother cleaned houses so my mother could go to college. My mother worked 3 jobs so I could attend medical school. I've faced discrimination at every step of my career. If I back down now, what message does that send to every black girl who dreams of breaking barriers?" She straightened her shoulders. Decision made. "Schedule a press conference for tomorrow morning. It's time America heard the full truth about corporate discrimination, not just at American Skyways, but across every industry where people like me are treated as exceptions rather than equals." What Imani couldn't know was that her words would spark a national reckoning far beyond anything she had imagined, and that her greatest triumph was about to emerge from her darkest moment. The grand ballroom of San Francisco's Fairmont Hotel hummed with anticipation as cameras from every major news network focused on the empty podium. When Imani Reynolds finally emerged, the crowd fell silent, struck by her transformation. Gone was the designer suit and carefully straightened hair. Instead, she wore a simple white dress and her natural curls framed her face, a visual reclamation of her authentic self. "Good morning," she began, her voice steady and clear. "Over the past 2 weeks, you've heard many versions of what happened on American Skyways Flight 3429. Today, I want to speak not just about one incident, but about the systems that made it possible and the courage required to change them." For the next 40 minutes, Imani methodically presented the evidence Catherine Lawson had provided. Internal documents, emails between airline executives, training materials, teaching employees to identify problem passenger profiles that overtly targeted minorities. "This isn't about one flight attendant or one airline," she emphasized. "This is about corporate America's systemic devaluation of people of color, especially those who dare to occupy spaces traditionally reserved for others." As she spoke, breaking news banners began scrolling across television screens nationwide. The Securities and Exchange Commission had just announced a formal investigation into American Skyways for securities fraud, centered on Theodore Wilson's deliberate concealment of discriminatory practices from shareholders and regulatory filings. Simultaneously, at the Department of Justice, the Attorney General held his own press conference announcing the formation of a corporate civil rights enforcement division specifically targeting systematic discrimination in service industries. The documents provided by Dr. Reynolds and other whistleblowers reveal a disturbing pattern of coordinated discrimination that potentially violates federal racketeering statutes, the Attorney General stated. "We are investigating similar practices across airlines, hotels, financial institutions, and healthcare providers." Back at the Fairmont, Imani was concluding her presentation when her phone buzzed with an urgent message. She paused, reading it with visible surprise, then looked up with renewed purpose. "I've just been informed that American Skyways has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection," she announced, causing a ripple of exclamations throughout the room. But this is not a moment for celebration. Thousands of innocent employees now face uncertain futures because of executive actions they had no control over. She took a deep breath before continuing. "Which is why I'm announcing today that MedTech Innovations, in partnership with 3 minority-owned investment firms, is forming a consortium to purchase American Skyways assets during bankruptcy proceedings." The room erupted in astonishment as Imani outlined her vision. The airline would be reorganized under new leadership with industry-leading anti-discrimination policies, restored employee benefits, and a corporate governance structure that included representatives from civil rights organizations on its board. "The goal isn't punishment," she clarified. "It's transformation. Not just of one company, but of what's possible when we refuse to accept discrimination as the cost of doing business in America." As reporters shouted questions, Theodore Wilson, sat alone in his penthouse, watching his legacy crumble on live television. His phone had stopped ringing. Former allies had disappeared. His own attorneys had advised him to cooperate with federal investigators to reduce potential criminal charges. The final blow came when his executive assistant forwarded an email that had been sent to all American Skyways employees. The White House had just announced the formation of a presidential commission on corporate discrimination and named Dr. Imani Reynolds as its chairperson. 6 months later, a very different scene played out aboard the inaugural flight of Skyway Renaissance Airlines, formed from the ashes of American Skyways. Imani walked through the first-class cabin, nodding, to the diverse crew, led by a black female captain who had previously been passed over for promotion 16 times at American Skyways. In Seat 2A, the same seat Imani had occupied on that fateful day, sat a young black girl traveling alone to a science competition. The flight attendant serving her section moved with attentive efficiency, ensuring the girl's comfort with genuine care. That flight attendant was Brenda Morrison. After the airline's collapse, Brenda had written Imani a lengthy apology, explaining the pressure and incentives that had shaped her behavior without excusing it. Rather than seeking vengeance, Imani had offered her something more powerful, the chance to be part of the solution. Now Brenda worked as both a flight attendant and a trainer in the airline's revolutionary anti-bias program, using her own story to teach others. As the plane reached cruising altitude, Imani made her way to the cockpit to congratulate the captain on her first flight as commander. On her return through the cabin, she paused at the young girl's seat. "Are you nervous about your competition?" she asked gently. The girl looked up, recognition dawning in her eyes. "You're Dr. Reynolds. My science teacher showed us your medical research. I want to be a doctor like you someday." Imani smiled. "What's your project about?" "Cancer treatment delivery systems," the girl replied eagerly. "I've designed a theoretical method to target specific cell mutations without damaging healthy tissue." Imani's eyebrows rose with genuine interest. "That's exactly the challenge my team has been working on. Would you like to visit our labs when you return?" The girl's face lit up. "More than anything." As Imani returned to her seat, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. What began as a humiliating act of discrimination had catalyzed a movement that was slowly reshaping American corporate culture. The $4 billion she had pulled from American Skyways had eventually become the cornerstone of a $10 billion investment in the new airline, one founded on principles of equity and inclusion. More importantly, the presidential commission she chaired was already implementing sweeping recommendations across multiple industries, creating pathways for accountability and representation that would benefit generations to come. Her phone chimed with a message from Marcus Chen, her CFO. Pharmaceutical partnership reinstated. Cancer treatment trials back on schedule. First patients receiving therapy next month. Imani closed her eyes, thinking of her late husband and the thousands of patients who would now have a fighting chance against the disease that took him. Some battles were worth any cost. As the aircraft soared through clear skies, Imani gazed out the window at the vast expanse of America below. The country's history was written in both oppression and resistance, in systems of exclusion and the courage of those who challenged them. Today, she had helped bend its long arc slightly more toward justice, not just for herself, but for a young girl in Seat 2A and countless others who would never know her name but would benefit from her refusal to accept discrimination as the final word. The plane banked gently west, toward a horizon bright with possibility. Dr. Imani Reynolds' journey demonstrates that systemic discrimination persists, even for those who have achieved exceptional success. Despite her Harvard education, medical innovations, and CEO status, she was still subjected to the same racial prejudice that affects people of color across America. Her story teaches us that confronting discrimination requires both individual courage and collective action. The most powerful lesson is that true change demands refusing to accept unjust systems even when fighting them comes at great personal cost. By rejecting settlements that would have silenced her while leaving discriminatory practices intact, Dr. Reynolds prioritized long-term justice over immediate personal gain. We also learn that documentation is crucial when facing discrimination. Dr. Reynolds' foresight in recording her interactions, provided irrefutable evidence that prevented her experience from being dismissed or distorted. Perhaps most importantly, the story reveals how institutional racism is often embedded in corporate policies and incentive structures, rather than existing solely as individual prejudice. Brenda's actions were shaped by a system that rewarded her for maintaining spaces where certain passengers felt comfortable at the expense of others' dignity. Finally, Dr. Reynolds demonstrates that true leadership means using power not for vengeance, but for transformation. By purchasing the airline and implementing anti-discrimination practices, she created systemic solutions rather than settling for symbolic victories. What moment in Dr. Reynolds' story resonated with you most deeply? Was it her composure when facing discrimination, her refusal to accept settlement money, or her ultimate decision to transform the airline rather than simply punish it? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever witnessed or experienced discrimination in a setting where you should have been treated as a valued customer? How did you respond? If you believe in creating a more just society where everyone is treated with dignity regardless of their appearance, hit that like button and subscribe to hear more powerful stories of resilience and transformation. Thank you for listening to Dr. Reynolds' journey from humiliation to triumph. May her story inspire all of us to stand firm in the face of injustice and work toward systems where everyone's humanity is fully recognized and respected.